Hey guys, welcome back. Hope you guys are doing well today. Let me do the sound check as always. Come on. Huh. It ain't showing up. Yes, testing. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. It sounds actually really good quality. I'm surprised actually. That microphone is much better than I expected, but it sounds really good. Maybe I changed some setting on there. I did earlier when I was recording yet another episode, but I think that's a part. Anyway, we're here again, back to Nonviolent Communication. It's a really good book, guys. I cannot recommend it enough. And it's also very important considering the times that we're in. Everyone's feeling all this stress, all this stuff is moving, all this extra energy. Interpersonal issues are increasing, family issues are increasing, political chaos is mounting, economic pressures are increasing. And so, again, as I mentioned in the last reading on nonviolent communication, the difference between observation and evaluation, right? This matters obviously when we're communicating with others, but I also took you to the point to realize that also matters how you communicate with yourself, observing and evaluating. Of course, for your interpersonal interactions, it matters, but it also matters. Why is this camera not focusing? What is going on here? Hello? What do I need to do to get this to focus? Because I can see that it's like fuzzy and I don't know why. I think now it's better. I don't even know. Anyways, guys, it's like ridiculous. Neither here nor there. But it's important how you're communicating with yourself also. So this nonviolent communication is not just interpersonal, obviously, but it also matters for yourself. So when you're reading these examples, he doesn't write it from that context, or she, Marshall. I don't know who Marshall is. Anyway, oh no. Yikes, guys. I just saw someone. Never mind. I'm not even going to address. No, I'm not even going to mention that. But just go ahead and check out the cover if you want to look up this book, and maybe you'll see the name at the bottom that is kind of bothering me. But anyway, in any case, let's go on with the reading today. So we're going to look at identifying and expressing feelings. So this is chapter 4 of this book. All right. So we're on page 37. And I want to look into the part of the heavy cost of unexpressed feelings. So, yeah, it's quite long. Identifying and expressing feelings. The first component of NVC, nonviolent communication, is to observe without evaluating. The second component is to express how we are feeling. Psychoanalyst Royo May suggests that the mature person becomes able to differentiate feelings into many nuances. Strong and passionate experiences, or delicate and sensitive ones, as in the different passages of music in a symphony. For many of us, however, our feelings are, as May would describe it, limited like notes in a bongo call. The heavy cost of unexpressed feelings. Our repertoire of words calling people names is often larger than our vocabulary of words for clearly describing our emotional states. I went through 21 years of American school and can't recall anyone in that time ever asking me how I felt. Feelings were simply not as important. What was valued was the right way to think, as defined by those who held position of rank and authority. We are trained to be other directed rather than to be concerned and in contact with our own selves. We learn to be up in the head, wondering, what is it that others think is right for me to do and say? An interaction I had with a teacher when I was about 9 years old demonstrates how alienation from our feelings can begin. Once I hid myself in a classroom after school because some boys were waiting for me outside to beat me up. A teacher spotted me and asked me to leave the school. When I explained I was afraid to go, she declared, "Big boys don't get frightened." A few years later, I received further reinforcement through my participation in athletics. It was typical for coaches to value athletes' willingness to give their all and continue playing no matter how much physical pain they were in. I learned a lesson so well that I once continued playing baseball for a month with an untreated broken wrist. That is extreme. At NVC workshops, Nonviolent Communication, a college student spoke about being kept awake by a roommate who played the stereo late all night and loudly. When asked to express what he felt when this happened, the student replied, "I felt that it isn't right to play music so loud at night." I pointed out that that when he followed the word feel with the word that, he was expressing an opinion, but not revealing his feelings. I asked to try again to express his feelings. He responded, "I feel when people do something like that, it's a personality disturbance." I explained that this was still an opinion rather than a feeling. He paused thoughtfully and then announced with vehemence, "I have no feelings about it whatsoever." This student obviously had strong feelings. Unfortunately, he didn't know how to become aware of his feelings, let alone express them. This difficulty in identifying and expressing feelings is common. And in my experience, especially so among lawyers, engineers, police officers, corporate managers, and military personnel, people whose profession or professional codes discourage them from manifesting emotions. For families, the toll is severe when family members are unable to communicate emotions. Country singer Reba McEntire wrote a song after her father's death and titled it "The Greatest Man I Ever Knew." In doing so, she undoubtedly expressed the sentiments of many people who were never able to establish emotional connection they would have liked with their fathers. I regularly hear statements like, I wouldn't want you to get the wrong idea. I'm married to a wonderful man, but I never know what he is feeling." Or such a dissatisfied woman brought one such dissatisfied woman brought her spouse to a workshop during which she told him, "I feel like I'm married to a wall." The husband didn't. The husband then the husband then did express um, excellent imitation of the wall. He said, "Mute and immobile." Exasperated, she turned to me and exclaimed, "See, this is what happens all the time. He sits and says nothing. It's just like living with a wall." "It sounds to me like you are feeling lonely and wanting more emotional contact with your husband," I responded. When she agreed, I tried to show how her statements, such as "I feel like I'm living with a wall," are unlikely to bring her feelings and desires to her husband's attention. In fact, they are more likely to be heard as criticisms than invitations to connection with our feelings. Furthermore, such statements often lead to self fulfilling prophecies. A husband, for example, hears himself criticized for behaving like a wall. He is hurt and discouraged, and he doesn't respond, thereby confirming his wife's image of him as a wall. The benefits of strengthening our feeling vocabulary are evident not only in intimate relationships, but also in the professional world. I was once hired to consult with members of a technological department of a large Swiss corporation. They were troubled by the discovery that workers in other departments were avoiding. Uh, they were troubled by the discovery that workers in other departments were avoiding them. When asked, the employees from other departments responded, "We hated going there to consult with those people. It's like talking to a bunch of machines." The problem abated when I spent time with the members of the technological department, encouraging them to express more of their humanness in their communication with their coworkers. In another instance, I was working with hospital administrators who were anxious about forthcoming meetings with the hospital physicians. The administrators were eager to have me demonstrate how they might use NVC, nonviolent communication, when approaching the physicians for support for a project that they had only recently been turned down by a vote of 17-1. Assuming the voice of an administrator in a role playing section, I opened with, "I'm feeling frightened. Um, I'm feeling frightened to be bringing this up." Tongue twister, guys. I'm feeling frightened to be bringing up this issue. I chose to start this way because I sense how frightened the administrators were as they prepared to confront the physicians on the topic again. But before I could continue, one of the administrators stopped me to protest. "You're being unrealistic. You could never tell the physicians that they were frightened." When I asked, uh, when I asked an administration, when I asked why an admission of fear seemed impossible, he replied without hesitation, "If we admitted we were frightened, they would just pick us to pieces." His answer didn't surprise me. I have often heard people saying they cannot imagine ever expressing feelings in the workplace. I was pleased to learn, however, that one of the administrators did decide to risk expressing his vulnerability at a dreaded meeting, departing from his customary manner of appealing strictly logical, rational, and unemotional. He chose to state his feelings together with his reasons for wanting the physicians to change their positions. He noticed how differently the physicians responded to him. In the end, he was amazed and relieved when, instead of picking him to pieces, the physicians reversed their previous position and voted 17-1 to support the project instead. This dramatic turnaround helped the administrators realize and appreciate the potential impact of expressing vulnerability, even in the workplace. Finally, let me share a personal incident that taught me the effects of hiding our feelings. I was teaching a course in NVC, nonviolent communication, to a group of inner city students. Um, when I walked into the room the first day, the students, who had been enjoying their lively conversation with each other, became quiet. "Good morning," I greeted. Silence. I felt very uncomfortable, but I was afraid to express it. Instead, I proceeded with my most professional manner. For this class, we will be studying the process of communication that I hope you will find helpful in your relationships at home and with your friends. I continued to be I continued to present information about NBC, but no one seemed to be listening. One girl, ruminating through her bag, fished out a file and began vigorously filing her nails. Students near the window glued their faces to the panes as it fascinated them by what was going on in the streets below. I felt increasingly more uncomfortable, yet continued to say nothing about it. Finally, a student who had certainly more courage than I was demonstrating popped up. "You just hate being with Black people, don't you?" I was stunned. Yet immediately I realized how I'd contributed to the student's perception by me trying to hide my discomfort. "I am feeling nervous," I admitted, "but not because you are Black. My feelings have to do with my not knowing anyone here and wanting to be accepted when I came, when I came in the room." My expression of vulnerability had a pronounced effect on the students. They started to ask questions about me, to tell me things about themselves, and to express curiosity in NVC, nonviolent communication. This is really good because it shows us how pressured we can be in our faulty understandings or perceptions of other people's emotional experiences, or even our own for that matter. And so that's why it becomes so important that we are able to return to ourselves and to connect with the experiences that we're actually feeling, because not expressing our feelings, that's it's so effective in so many ways, right? Now you think in certain areas there might be more vulnerability, and it also depends on your audience, right? And the times that you're in. But most people will respond well to appropriately express vulnerability. Like, you don't want to go, falling on the floor and crying just like completely disheveled. But some mm, not that strategically, but some carefully expressed and communicated vulnerability allows the opening for connection, you know? That's what is the most important part about this section here as we start in on chapter 4. Your unexpressed feelings have a cost, and we just talked about the communication levels, but we also know from The Body Keeps the Score and In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabramante that our um, lack of emotional expression also has impacts on our physical body. They cause us diseases, increased stress, increased cortisol levels, which then has trickle down effects down the body, most likely beginning with the gut and then proliferating to cause other diseases, inflammation, and so forth. And so your unexpressed feelings, literally, like, we are here to express. If you remember a few days ago, the video by Brian Withers, the short by Brian Withers, where he was saying, we have a personal guidance system, and that is our emotions. That's our higher being. So it's literally God. We are denying God when we deny our emotions. You understand how deep that is? You are denying God when you deny your emotions. And denial of God is then the opposite, which we know what that is. And so expressing yourself clearly, consistently, and in some cases, opening up to your vulnerability is so important because it gives you space to make the connection that you need. Without that, you're on a different understanding, on a different level, misinterpretations, confusion comes in, and it becomes difficult to really make the connections, understanding, and bonds that you want to make in your life. And you really need to support yourself. And additionally, if you want to have communications with others that is like enjoyable, beneficial, effective overall, this is important. You cannot have effective communication if it's not authentic. I mean, that's a good question. I guess it can be effective if it's not like because you could be projecting something on someone like an insult, like if someone want to call like a friend wants to call me fat or something based on an argument. Like obviously I'm not fat. I was, but I'm not anymore. And so obviously I know that they're projecting that onto me. And so I need to be able to understand where they're coming from that makes them have that reaction and that lash out or that comment, that insult, because it's not a reflection of reality. It's coming from that person who is externalizing it by projecting it. And so this is how we can kind of lower the temperature, right? On conversations, discussions, so they don't get too heated. We need to really be in the present moment, active listening, understanding what people are saying so that we don't get carried away. And above all, you have to be open. You have to be open. You have to not wearing your feelings on your sleeve, and you still have to be aware and careful and attentive because there are many Machiavellian and dark triad people around, especially these days, right? But still, you don't want to lose sight of the goal that vulnerability is the pathway to connection. This is really the only way. Even I love this example of the school kids, if you have a white person, a white middle-aged lady going into a school and maybe the upper Bronx or something. She didn't say where that was, but with inner city kids who are like disadvantaged, don't have parents, they're like really unwild, so it's like two different worlds coming together. And how could she diffuse that comment that student made? Oh, you don't like us because you're black, or you're feeling this good. But her open and honesty really even allowed people in a different whole mindset, two different kinds of people to come together because of that expressive vulnerability. You see what I'm saying? That's why it's important. You can really de-escalate a situation by just being open about it. And many people don't understand that. Many people want to live in this like brute force way, which that was the original question I was asking. Can you have effective communication without authenticity? So, I mean, it depends on what your level of what your definition of authenticity is. Because, for example, I was thinking about bullying. Bullying could be effective if it works to communicate to make someone else feel worse. But is it really authentic? Because normally a bully is just externalizing their own pain, as I just said, onto someone else. So that is one communication strategy, bullying. And I mean, it's effective if it works to make that person feel bad or to displace any emotions that were trying to be displaced. But is that really authentic? Because I don't think that the bully is being authentic to themselves. They're just using that as a mechanism to offload feelings that they don't want to process. That's like the opposite of authenticity. Because if the bully was authentic, they would acknowledge the feelings within themselves that caused them to feel a need to lash out or to put someone else down, but they don't, you know? And it's not an effective way of being with other people. And it's not an effective way of being with yourself, most importantly. So when you're talking about this heavy cost of unexpressed feelings here, we discussed in communication with others. But now let's flip this on yourself. If you're not honest with yourself about your feelings, you will never be able to advance, to make progress, and to be grounded in yourself to develop the confidence and certainty that you need in life. It's not possible. I really do believe that it's not possible. And so here, it's going to be so important that we start to think about how we can be more open with ourselves, how we can express and not hide the feelings that we have internally. That's the first step. Because unless we can uncover or unveil the emotions that we have hidden inside, we'll never be able to communicate our feelings comfortably, confidently, from a grounded place with others. We have to be able to do that with ourselves first. It's kind of like you're saying, oh, you want validation, confidence, support, love, like self-love. Is that has to come from within first. What you perceive in your world is just what's reflected back to you. You know, you have to fight, you have to push, you have to stay dedicated, you have to honor yourself and remember what you deserve. You deserve to express yourself. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be held in your emotions, even not just heard, not just tolerated, um, but held. And you have to do that for yourself first if you're on this reparenting journey and that hasn't happened for you. Identifying and expressing feelings, you cannot do that until you start to hold yourself. You know, you have to hold it. Like you can do the self hug. You know, when you're bringing in that inner loving parent, sometimes you have to do that. You can do some rocking back and forth. These self-soothing behaviors can help to calm your nervous system. These are also important, because the cause of unexpressed feelings is decay, stagnation. You will never be able to grow if you are refusing to express what's inside. It will just lead to disease and the decaying of your body, literally. And so that's it for the reading today. It was a really nice piece. And I will see you guys the next time. Cheers.